And welcome to the Leadership Puzzle, where we break down the challenges of modern leadership and help you put the right pieces together. I'm your host, Jeff Lupinacci, and I am really happy to have our next guest on. When we first met, it felt like we were old friends.
Yes.
Betsy Campbell Barth has built her career on the intersection of leadership, culture, and just running large HR organizations. She's helped guide global teams. Has lived in the UK, Spain, US, originally from Germany, and she brings this rare blend of strategic HR and boots on the ground expertise. She definitely has a gift for making the complex feel human. And so I can't wait to have the conversation with her. Betsy, welcome to the Leadership Puzzle.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for having me. My husband is the one who's originally from Germany. I grew up in the US, but very strong connection. He immigrated here about 20 odd years ago. So we are deep roots in Germany.
Yeah, but you have spent time and you've lived in Germany, right?
I lived in Germany
Yeah.
for about 5 years.
Okay.
Fascinating and very exciting. And I enjoy visiting. My younger son is now over there and
That's right.
doing his civil service year and really enjoys living close to Oma, as we call grandma in German,
Yeah.
and favorite Uncle Wolfgang.
Yeah, I knew there was a really hard, deep connection with Germany, and I think I don't know about you, but I have found anytime that I interact with an expat,
Mhm.
there's almost an immediate bond. Uh,
Yes,
you kind of cross paths and you go, we don't know each other, but we have some experiences that are are just you can just connect with.
100%. I feel such a kindred spirit with expats. As you know, what I've shared is that I've been dying to get back to live in Barcelona permanently. They have a huge expat population from people all over the world, and I just feel like it's an amazing community that is untapped. And you meet so many, folks with diverse backgrounds who have done very different things, and it's just fun to meet up and hear stories and share our excitement.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess I didn't realize that Barcelona had a big expat community. I spent most of my expat time over in Asia, a little bit in Russia, which didn't have quite the size expat community.
Yes, that must have been fascinating being in Russia. I got an opportunity to work with Russia when I was at Visa, and it was fascinating. I got to visit Moscow. I would have loved to have been able to go to St. Petersburg, but
Yeah,
fascinating being an expat in Russia.
it was definitely different, and we could probably have a whole conversation of just let's talk about the uniquenesses of each country and just the
Yes.
benefits and the beauty that every country has, good and bad, including our own.
Well, I with living in so many different countries, there's so many things I like by with each country. No place is perfect, and everything has its special charm.
That is true, and so anybody who like hates their country, well, you know what? There is no perfect country. It's run by people, and people are in it, and people are messy.
100%.
Okay, so you've had this amazing career spanning multiple continents. Talk to me a little bit about your journey and how has that journey really shaped you as a business leader first and foremost, and obviously an HR leader second.
You know, f Having this opportunity to travel and live in multiple different countries, I feel that it has helped me to be a very adaptable person, someone who can listen deeply, move intentionally, and lead with context. Is, as you know, when you're dealing with many different languages, cultures, people, when you're explaining, the business needs and rationale, what works in one country doesn't always mean it works in another. It doesn't mean that, one way is the right way, but it gives you that broader mindset to really, listen and hear all the different perspectives and guide the team in the right direction. And also, taking their input to help drive, leadership the way you're wanting to move. And most of all, it builds trust.
Yeah.
It's important. It's not just about alignment, but the true currency of leadership is trust.
I like that. The currency of leadership is trust. That's great. That's great. It should be a bumper sticker. um, so you've lived in U.S., UK, Spain, Germany.
I
I
have.
might have missed someplace. But where did you find the easiest to live and maybe the more challenging? You would think, oh, UK would be super easy from as an American, but I don't know if that's a real sentiment.
Well, I mean, UK was somewhat easy. My dad's family being British immigrants. Spain, I found easy because one, I think the lifestyle and the way they operate resonates for me. A night person. I like kind of later in the day. I'm okay with, things being a little more fluid, take a little more time to get things done. I would say Germany was most challenging because one, I had to learn the language when
Uh,
I moved there. So right off the bat, is something I had, learning a language in your 20s. And when you learn languages at a much younger age, it's much easier. Um, in this, kind of their ways of doing things, they have a lot of rigor and process around things. I do remember when I moved into one of my first apartments, they're funny, like about you must clean the lint out of the dryer. And I remember somebody coming up to me, and I think because I was the foreigner in the building, like, we think you're the one not cleaning out the lint in the dryer. And it's like that's one thing my mother taught me to do was pull that lint out. But it's just, learning to, not get offended by that and kind of understand where the person and, where
yeah,
they're from. And, I just said, hey, I'll take that under advisement, but good to know, like, we need to keep that dryer lint clean.
yeah. Oh, how funny. Yeah,
Right.
it's uh so any other like unique stories there? I was like, oh my gosh, that is so culturally different than what I would have ever thought of.
I think in Spain, on the positive note of that, what I really appreciate is they take the time to really
Mhm.
understand and, make the decision, move it forward. And I think sometimes, early in my career, it was all about speed and execution. I was a fixer, I wanted to, make sure that we're doing the right things and fixing things quickly. Now that, I'm in a leadership position, head of HR, CPO, it's really about influencing and hearing and asking the right questions and having that curiosity to understand those and take the time and have, the group come to that consensus and decision. So
Mm.
it's kind of that was to me like the biggest pivot, especially, thinking of moving back to Spain now permanently and dealing with having two households and splitting my time and in the way, of getting things done there and getting things done here, very different. I'm much more relaxed when I'm in Spain. And then when I'm here, I feel in San Francisco, I'm a little more intense.
Well, I mean, San Francisco is a fast-paced, intense, high-tech Silicon Valley kind of world, right? So I can see where it almost be completely opposite in terms of the
Barcelona
pace.
is getting into that though. They have a really big startup community and a lot of
Mm.
foreign nationals are moving in there. So, I see how it's changing. Living in Spain 25 years later, is really different. Like, when I lived in Madrid 20 odd years ago, I remember going to Blockbuster and renting a VCR just so I could watch, a movie in English. Where now, like, you got Netflix, you got your subscription television, you can just pop it on, you have your Fire Stick, and there it is, voila, in 5 minutes. So
Right.
I feel like you lose a little bit and you have to be intentional about getting ingrained in the culture that, when you're there, like one of the first things I did when I moved to Spain 25 years ago was live with two individuals who didn't speak any English.
So you had to learn Spanish.
Yes. So it really put that on. I think today you have to be more intentional about that because I think, English is widely spoken and especially in Barcelona, you hear it
Yeah.
almost every corner.
But one of the things that I found is you may be speaking English, but you may not be saying the same thing.
Right.
I remember when we first moved to Malaysia, the my team invited my family on a weekend out to for a picnic, and in the U.S., when you think picnic, it could be lunch, maybe it's a early dinner, but
Right.
it's kind of late in her day, and my wife was like, oh, well, what time? I said, well, it's probably lunchtime, and she's like, well, why don't you just double check? I said, okay, well, makes sense. And they said, well, no, a picnic is in the morning because we were going to the beach. And I was like, what? It's like, well, it gets so hot. We're meeting at 7 in the morning for our picnic. And so, instead of,
Uh-huh.
sandwiches and stuff, it's muffins.
100%. I mean, you wouldn't think a picnic would be at 7 a.m. in the morning. You usually think of an afternoon. Yes, I hear you, Jeff. Even being married to, my husband who was born and raised in Germany, sometimes I have to ask, is this what you mean? Just to get under the hood of the car, because sometimes, the way he is processing it and thinking about it is very different than the way and that's our upbringing, is, our
Yeah.
cultural upbringing of where we come from.
So, so you've had to learn how to shift that mindset and listen with a different ears than what someone who's only lived in their current cultural context,
Yes.
country wise. So, how do you help other leaders listen for those contexts and help them integrate in when you're dealing with these multinationals that have a lot of different cultures that are separate from the company culture.
You really have to have curiosity, is number one, and ask questions. I think we always assume, you know, it's always good to assume good intentions, but I think we have our biases and assumptions that we have to kind of put to the side and really, hear what the individual is saying and ask the question so you can really understand what their underlying context is. And, if I look at that, putting it in the context of a lot of the acquisitions I've worked on in my past, is that we all we often overlook kind of that cultural gap right out the door. Like we're all kind of coming in, we want to get it done. This is the company. We jump right into the tactics of the culture of titles and systems versus understanding that emotional landscape a little bit
Hmm.
before making, these calls, like, because people are asking when they're coming into our company, as you do M&A, what's changing? Do I still belong? Is there space for me to ask questions? I'm trying to make it more of a trackable work stream, to remind our leaders as we go through this, as you're meeting these teams and you're bringing them on board and you're talking to them, be intentional, be curious, have curiosity, ask the right questions. Don't just treat it like, I got to integrate these people and we're done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you bring up a interesting nuance around cultures. At the core, you have the country culture, whatever you grew up in, and then
Right.
you have other layers of family culture or schooling or kind of education. But then kind of sitting on top of that is the company culture. And when you go to start buying companies, if
Hmm.
it if they're multinational, if they have locations outside of whatever country that you're buying in, you have to think about those different layers.
Hmm.
uh so how do you you mentioned it, you have to think about that. How do you help the leaders think about not just do they fit into the company culture, but how does that company culture fit in with the context of the country culture, especially if it's a new country?
Yes. And in the couple of the acquisitions we had, for example, we bought a company that was in Spain and Colombia, very exciting countries. And in Colombia, we were in the heart of what we call the coffee country. Many of the folks that, are working there, some have traveled, some haven't, some speak English, some don't. So it was a lot of helping people to kind of take a step back, our leaders. You have to remember where these folks are coming from, where they're currently at, and you've got to meet them where they're at. You can't expect them to just come to you. You got to meet them where they're at and guide them through this process. So, we have, a lot of leaders who have direct reports in Colombia, and we've hired some really good, leaders there locally as well. But I know it was a transition for some to, you have to remember it's more of what I love about the Colombian culture, they care about building a relationship
Yeah.
and getting to know you, not just on the business level, but a little bit more intimate. And I had to remind some of the leaders, you got to make a little bit of talk with the folks, ask them how they're doing. Family is very important. Ask them, about family, what is exciting and what's unique. You have to remember, you kind of adapt that. Like in Russia, I'm sure it was a very different conversation when you meet people there. They sometimes don't like to go into the small talk piece. So you kind of have to adapt to your audience. Germany's kind of in between that in
Right.
some respects is it's really, having kind of a that thought process to who's your audience and who you're talking to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what you're doing is going to resonate for the individual. That's a lot of the kind of the coaching I provide to some of our leaders and people that, I would meet, when I'm handling even personal items in Spain.
Yeah. 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 It reminds me of when I was in Costa Rica. I took a role in Costa Rica, and the very first day, the country manager says, "Let's go out to lunch,"
Mm.
and he orders a bottle of wine, and I'm like, "It's the
Yep.
middle of the workday." It's like, yeah, okay. Like, all right, whatever, let's go.
Right. In the US, that wouldn't be something that we do. In the old insurance days, I remember when I started out, only 20 years ago, the insurance had a little bit of that, like, oh, it's lunch, it's Friday, let's kind of kick back, but
Yeah, the
not.
two martini lunches. I mean, that used to be a thing for sure. So you've done quite a few integrations. Are there any lessons that you've learned that you go, okay, yeah, these are just really non-negotiables. I'm gonna any integration, any M&A that I do, these are the things that I'm gonna make sure happen, like right up front.
I would say the one learning is when you do make an acquisition, you can't just leave them to their own devices after the fact.
Mm,
You have to have, if it's not that you want to integrate the product immediately, but you do have to integrate and figure out what your culture, because when you're bringing on, new countries, new people, different ways of working, you want to get it right out the get-go, and you want to have a roadmap and a pathway to that. I would say that was one of the biggest learnings I would say in my career around M&A is you just can't buy a company and say, oh, leave it here and we'll deal with it later. Because then they're kind of swirling and wondering what's going on.
yeah,
And it
yeah.
doesn't feel like we're kind of that one vision, one company.
Though that is interesting because there are some CEOs, some organizations that are like, don't care about integrating. We're just gonna buy them and uh, almost act like a holding company of sorts. But it 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 kind of defeats the purpose of buying them and trying to get
Right.
some economies of scale.
Exactly. And then why are you purchasing the company and keeping it as a separate entity?
Because it will come back to bite you down the road if you don't integrate them. I mean, everything from uh, uh, like paychecks. I mean, I remember one company. They had bought this
Mhm.
little company, and they didn't bother to get a legal entity to do it. They just used the old entity, and so even 15 years later, they were still getting paychecks from this other company, company name, and you're like, wait a second, what?
What's going
Who
on
are
here?
we?
Yes. And it's those little things that make people feel belonging to the
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, and I think there's talent that you get through these acquisitions that I think is important that they have opportunities right away to make impact. They can bring in a new fresh set of ideas, skill set that even elevate the current teams.
Now, do you have like a playbook? The CEO says, "Hey, Betsy, we got a new acquisition. Okay, great. Let me pull it not off the shelf, but yeah, let me pull it up and let's go."
I have an adaptable playbook because I would say, I've worked at Concentrics in my past that had huge acquisitions that were like 50,000 people. At Visa, they were a little bit smaller, but Visa had a very specific way of managing their acquisitions. They were more few and far between. At Yahoo, we were doing an acquisition a month. Some of it we kept, some of it we divested. So it's about being flexible. You can have some underlying guiding principles, I think is important, especially around culture and integrating the people. And then I think the hard stuff that's more like the systems, structures and titles that can come more naturally, but understand kind of the underlying motivations, the company culture, what pieces, are going to work, with your current culture that you have within your company. And then how do we move forward and get, some of their leaders and some of the folks involved right away is what I think is really important is understanding because one, you got to really understand what's going on there. Due
Yeah.
diligence is important. The due diligence I always feel goes really fast and you don't get to hear maybe all the things you need to hear, but then, once that's complete, make sure you have some good partners in crime.
Yeah, and I don't know if you found this, but I certainly found that HR tends to be an afterthought in the due diligence, and I mean it should be front and center
It
because
has to. People are the asset that you're taking over. Like you want that
exactly,
talent that are building that product.
what's the culture? How are people going to fit in? Think about, how are you going to do that integration if the cultures, are vastly different? Um, Benefits, gosh, but just trying to align benefits from the two companies can be a big challenge.
Pay equity,
Yeah,
stock options, that having that kind of line of sight of, you're part of this company now, having equity gives you skin in the game, long-term vision.
right, right, right. Okay, so we probably could keep talking about acquisitions, but I want to get into a little bit more about your leadership and some of the other things. Um, uh, everyone has a lesson early in their career. Maybe it's a failure, maybe it's a wild success that was unexpected. Um, what about you? What can you go back and think about a particular moment or activity or failure that you learned from? You said, I'm going to be better going forward.
One that resonates for me that I also talk about with my children is early on when I was in the military. I was in ROTC, and there were very few females that were in ROTC when I was there, especially in the Marine Corps. And I remember we had another female, and a lot of times she wasn't showing up for PT and wasn't, coming to the table. And I remember the leader said, "She's your responsibility. You need to make sure she shows up because you're a leader." And that really hit home for me is that you need to make sure your entire team is motivated and everybody shows up. There's no one left behind. And that was a very early leadership learning for me in my 20s is that because you're kind of thinking when they were asking me, why isn't she showing up? And I'm like, I don't know. Why don't you ask her? And they're like, I'm asking you. It's really, even if you're not that direct leader of it, it's being accountable, showing up as that leader. And I think that's important that no one's left behind. And if they are getting left behind, you need to understand why.
Yeah, but that's fascinating. I suspect many of us have a similar kind of thing where someone above us came and asked us a question that
Mhm.
not really in our purview. Sounds like you might have answered it better than I did. I was like, that's not my job, and the VP of operations just laid into me. Is like, I don't, I asked you the question. It's your job unless someone tells you otherwise. I'm like, okay, it's a good lesson.
Being a leader is much broader. It's not about just staying in your swim lane all the time
Yeah.
or having a very narrow scope, but it's, taking accountability and showing up. And, if you don't have the answer, how do you get to the answer? And maybe asking the right question to get to the answer.
Yeah, that's a good lesson that I think a lot of the 20 somethings and Gen Zs and alphas could, hopefully they can learn
Mhm.
constructively early enough in their career to have a career worth of accountability mindset and saying, yeah, I'm gonna own it until I find someone who is the right owner if I'm not that right
Correct.
owner.
Because, we're a team and we can achieve as a team. And if you have, folks that aren't showing up or detractors, you need to figure out why, what's going
Yeah.
on.
no, that's great. That's a great lesson that everybody can learn from. Um, I was doing a little bit of stalking on you, and I saw that you wrote a blog about the importance of HR and finance really needing to partner together, and I I think that that's a partnership that a lot of HR just don't have the right mindset for. So talk about why you think that partnership is so important and some of the values that you see by establishing that strong connection with the CFO.
To me, it's one of the most important relationships that HR can have in the organization. As I really look at for the CEO, that HR and finance are the right and left hand. It comes down to, people,
Yeah.
culture, as well as how does that drive our business, and we make money to profitability. And I love seeing that there's a lot of shift towards more, the CPO role being very business minded, really making sure that your people strategy ties in with the business needs of the organization. And to me, it's two sides of the same coin. We're here for, resource stewardship. It's
Yeah.
important. People are our biggest expense, and we need to make sure we hire the right people, retain the right people. These are levers that drive the retention in the company, the engagement, the productivity, the culture. And for me, like this partnership has always been key. Back to my visa days, I remember we had a really exciting CFO because we went public, and I remember him saying, "Do you think or do you know?" You couldn't be like, I think, nope, you got to know. And I think, for the CFO and the CPO, they got to be hand in hand. And here at Flyer, I work very closely with our CFO, CAO, and I love that relationship. This individual is a real thought partner for me.
You just said something that is actually quite profound. Do you think or do you know?
Mhm.
I mean, how many people couch their statement on I believe or I think
Right.
when they really should be saying I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is at least in everything that I understand, I know this to be true.
Yes. That was another leadership learning in my career. I remember, when I was being coached in, hey, when you're going to meet the CFO, don't say I think. You got to know. And if you don't know, say you don't know.
Yeah. Boy, that's a hard I don't know lesson, a hard thing to 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 say. It's like, oh, I don't know. Too many people are afraid to say I don't know. They make up a lot of
Mhm.
bunk to try to make them sound like they know. But um, it sounds like if you don't know, you say it and say, but I will go find an answer and I'll get back to you in 3 days or whatever.
I don't have the answer. I'm not clear on it right now, but you know what? I'm going to go research it. I'm going to talk to some people, I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's
that builds trust. And then people trust that, hey, what you're saying is word. You know what you're talking about.
yeah. Yeah, because we started about trust and leadership and you're right. If you don't know and you let the person you know see that you're willing to say, hey, I don't have the answer, I'll get it for you. All of a sudden they start thinking, okay, well, this person's not just going to blow smoke at me. They're gonna be truthful in what they tell me. And if they know, they know. If they don't, they don't.
Right.
Love it. Love it. Love it. All right. Now speaking about like finance, it's all the numbers, it's data, which HR does historically tend to not have the same level of understanding of P&Ls, that kind of stuff, but also on the data side, right? I mean, HR is a function is just now coming into its own with some of the data analytics. You've done a good bit around that. I know you're passionate about data analytics. Talk to us a little bit about how HR should be stepping into this world and leveraging data to drive better decisions and value to the organization.
I mean, data to me is your underlying facts to make decisions. You can't make great decisions without having good, solid facts behind it. Our team here, one of the things I'm most proud about with my team is they have built their homegrown data dashboards. They take a lot of time. They ask the right questions, but it's really understanding, the problem. And then once you understand what you're solving, you can put that data behind it. So they always have curiosity. They always ask each other questions. They ask the business questions. What do you want to see? We have moved into now having a lot of overtime to support one of our key marquee clients. We want to make sure the leaders have insight into the overtime, the spend, you know,
Yeah.
if there's any issues behind it, are there things we need to do differently? Are we paying enough? Do we need to look at, how we're remunerating? Do we have enough people on call? It's really important to make sure you have good data. And I would say one of the three pieces that I focus on, even when doing board decks and talking to the CEO, CFO, is, our voluntary attrition, I think is
Hmm.
important. What's behind it, where the pockets are, what are the trends that we're seeing, pay equity, we're paying fair and equitable across, in our countries, within the organization, and then leadership trust and engagement scores. And I think this one is a little more tough to measure because it kind of comes through. You have pulse surveys. I like the pulse surveys because one, it gives you more of the real-time data versus, doing engagement once or twice a year. Data goes stale really quick. Ad hoc listening tools. I think AI, this is where AI is going to be really powerful for HR in the
Right.
future, is to really give HR the insights that they need of the pulse in the business of where, people's headspace are at or what tools they need. When I think about working pre-COVID, it felt like a snail's pace. And now post-COVID and with AI, things are moving fast. You got to be flexible, fluid, adapt, be open to change, keep moving. Because today we could be looking at this, tomorrow we might be looking at that. And that's okay. That's what makes it exciting and challenging.
Well, I'm going to get back on analytics, but you brought up AI and so how are you using AI, and if so, for what? I mean, it's a hot topic right now, so folks would be really interested in hearing how you're leveraging AI to benefit the business.
Well, the team is leveraging it to help one to put together the data analytics. And the big one that, since we are a lean team, is we're looking at AI for a gentle coaching to help augment the business partnering team
Mm.
for our managers to help them better prepare, writing performance reviews, having critical conversations, how to resolve conflict. Because we're looking at a unique tool that I got through the People Tech Partner Forum. And I'm hoping it'll help our managers to level up their game.
That's
I
great.
exciting for them. And then it also helps make my people business partners a little more strategic, so they're not having to focus so much on, some of the feedback fire drilling, but let's be more focused on talent management, coaching and development. So that's what I'm excited about is where we're at. It's like we've kind of picked one thing to solve for and test it, try it, make sure it works. And then the team will tell me, hey, this is the next problem we need to solve with AI.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's a great use case to figure out. You know, uh, I talk a lot about having to manage this. I call it a third workforce because it's
Yep.
literally taking work off of folks' plates so that they can go do more strategic things. But you still have to manage it. So have you thought through who's going to own and manage this agentic system, coaching system for you?
So we have one individual on the team who is, I would call, the owner of it, and they seek feedback from their stakeholders and partners and make sure it fits in with the broader people strategy. That's the one thing I like about, having these AI tools is we can have different owners across the HR team that gives them an opportunity to develop and
Hmm.
really, you know, take this from start to finish. So, and I think it's going to morph and change. I would say what we're looking at today is going to probably look very different in 12 months.
Sure.
These agentic AIs become more progressive in the way they operate. We're using, we have Lattice for performance and goal setting. We're using, part of their AI to help, navigate Lattice, which is great because then you don't have to go to someone on the team, say, help me understand how to use this tool. Like the AI agent can help them walk through the components of it, which I think is really helpful because we're really working with our managers. Documentation is key.
Yep.
Tool for that. You can put your goals in here. You can have your critical conversations, your feedback, kudos. We do our performance. we really want to make sure that they use that kind of as a one-stop shop. So,
Microsoft had a big white paper recently, and they said, "Oh, it's going to be the rise of AI bosses," right? So where instead of a people manager, you're managing these agents and whatnot. Um, it just dawned on me as I was listening to you to think is or listen to you, talk is, I wonder if this could be that entryway into to management, like people management, without stepping into manage the AI agent first, and then a good next career step would be to manage people.
I think it could, but I mean, one thing with human behavior, it's always unpredictable. I think with the AI agent, it might be a little easier. So I think it can prepare you somewhat, but it won't
Yeah.
have you prepared for every use case.
I don't know. ChatGPT seems to be unpredictable sometimes.
Yes. Doesn't always give you the answer that you want to hear.
It's like, wait a second, what?
You
Just
pull that
five
from?
minutes ago, it was you had it right. Now it's wrong. What's up?
What changed?
Okay, so I want to just go back real quick to your analytics really quick because I know we're running out of time. But if you would pick one kind of
Mm.
core analytic, data KPI that you really like paying attention to, what would that be?
It's hard to pick one. I would say that the two is one is retention, making sure we're retaining the right people, and the other one is trust. Making sure the teams feel that they trust leadership. They trust that, we're doing right by the company because I feel drives a lot of your culture.
Sure, sure. No, those are good. I I tend to favor velocity.
Hmm.
Um, nowadays it used to be that, gosh, every 3 years, if you were promoted, so every 30% of your top talent every year should be getting new or bigger jobs. Now it's almost 50% has to be doing something more, even if they're just micro promotions. So
Or an assignment or even a lateral move. I feel like, career development is not always just upward, but it's looking for how can I broaden my skill set? What different things can I do? It's, I'm working in this engineering team. I would like to learn more about, this other product. Can I go over there and learn more? And it's really kind of identifying, skill versus will and moving people who, might have a really strong will, who will make a really good partner working on something new and different, even though they might not have that specific degree or skill set in that area.
right, right, right. Yeah, it's just so important to keep people engaged. I mean, you talked about pulse surveys, so this is a real good way to keep, especially top talent, engaged as they are getting these new opportunities to learn and grow.
100%. Even like in my current role, I go beyond just HR. I'm in managing director on two of our entities in Spain and Germany and do some of the operational components. It gives me real insight into the business, and it's nice to be able to stretch beyond, just the HR realm.
Yeah. Oh, that's a whole nother podcast on how HR, if you're really looking at it from a business perspective, HR should be able to move into virtually any other role that's maybe not like hard engineering technical
Right.
kind of role, but from a
100%.
business perspective. Yeah.
I like that, Jeff. That we should do a podcast on that.
Okay,
That would
well,
be
we'll have to do that, but unfortunately, we are out of time today. We've covered a lot of great topics on integration and culture, and even got into AI, which I hadn't really planned on. Um,
it always comes up in the conversation, I find.
you can't even walk down the street without someone saying, "Hey, what do you think about AI?"
Yes. Well, this has
So.
been fun, Jeff. Thank you so much.
Well, I really appreciate your time, Betsy, and just to see and you brought out some amazing leadership principles that I know our listeners can put into their leadership puzzle. And so, thank you so much, Betsy, for joining us. And, if you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share it with your colleagues. And if you're ready to take your people strategy to the next level, we'd love to talk to you. Until next time, keep leading, keep learning, and keep solving your leadership puzzle.